Welcome to the SB Nation Selection Committee. My name is Dan. If you've watched this at all this season, you know how the show goes, and it's a pretty fun time, I would say. Jason Kirk, Bud Elliott, Bill Connolly, generally Spencer Hall. I don't know. Spencer's where? Where is Spencer?
Spencer's sick, for one thing, and also he's traveling.
Okay.
We have gotten him on McDonald's Wi-Fi before, so traveling shouldn't be enough to stop him. It takes two things to take him down.
That's not okay, but it's okay. We'll get Spencer soon. We are now heading into Conference Championship weekend after Rivalry Week, and we have now seen even more separation, which was to be expected, particularly in the SEC, where we know there are a lot of good teams, but when you have all sorts of good teams grouped together, they're all going to beat each other up, which has sufficiently happened, and we now have Conference Championship games this coming weekend, and whatever it is that the Big 12 does at the end of their season, which is Bedlam and Baylor, Kansas State, and I don't really know what else. But before we get into the future, let's talk about the present. Bill, who are your top four teams? Who are the best teams, the most deserving teams, and some sort of combination thereof that will be in Pasadena and New Orleans?
Well, I think it's funny. At this point, I'm struggling to differentiate between my own thoughts and what I know the committee's going to do. It's very obvious, I think, at this point, what the committee's going to come up with, at least in terms of a top six tomorrow. And so I just kind of accept that, and I don't really have original thought here. But no, I mean, I think Alabama is a good number one at this point. They proved, if nothing else, I mean, Auburn's defense has its issues, obviously, but they proved that if they get into a shootout, they're fine with it, and they will be happy to go along and eventually overtake you because they have the best receiver in the country. Oregon's a good number two. Florida State's a good number three. And honestly, I mean, I think it seems pretty obvious that TCU is going to be 4 tomorrow night. I kind of think that's fine too. I really like TCU. I think from a quality standpoint, that defense is the of those one-loss teams right there that we're talking about for 4 through 6. That defense is probably the best overall unit of any of them now that Barrett's coming for Ohio State. So. I'm fine with that, and I'm fine with the other two being 5, 6 in whatever order.
Okay, fair enough. And why is it obvious? I'll follow up quickly before moving on. Why is it obvious that TCU is the number 4 team by the standard of the committee?
Because they were number 5, Mississippi State lost, and they had the easiest win of the three remaining. I mean, they could do something crazy, but I don't see that they're going to.
All right, Jason, who is in your top 4 at this very moment?
I think we'll all have the same top 3. I had Oregon number 1 last week, and I don't think that quite changes just yet. Their loss to Arizona just got even better, whereas Bama, their loss to Ole Miss, that sort of just evens out because Ole Miss beating Mississippi State, that doesn't really swing any of Bama's schedule. They had a great win against Auburn, and either of those at number 1 is fine. FSU number 3 because they cannot possibly lose a football game to any team that has ever been assembled. And I think TCU is a really easy choice for number 4. It's it's been super close week in and week out, but at this point they're like a solid number 3 in the computers. So having them at number 4 seems fine. They just plain looked better than Baylor or Ohio State last week. And the out-of-conference schedule, Minnesota very nearly winning a power conference division. I think TCU is a simple choice for number 4 this week and for next week, assuming no upsets.
So I'll give you the Baylor fan counterpoint, like, excuse me, TCU lost head-to-head to Baylor. When you take the whole season into account, you spoke about last weekend, Baylor's win being far less impressive than TCU's win. Do you feel, as a whole, TCU's resume, eye test, everything, what they've done when you compare very similar schedules, except for the out-of-conference, still is ahead of Baylor?
I think when you talk about in terms of numbers and resume and stuff like that, yeah, absolutely. Just the simple fact that, yes, head-to-head in one context, that means Baylor beat TCU on that day. But if you put that in the context of the whole season, TCU had one very close loss that it had in hand with 8 minutes left to a really good team on the road, and Baylor got blown out by a 7-5 team. Those are the context of the 2 losses. As far as the eye test, they both look great, and I don't have the scout's eye. I can't possibly tell you which team is better just based on the eyes alone. So I kind of have to default to what the computers say, what Bill's numbers say, who's beating him, that kind of stuff. But they both look like top 6 teams at absolute worst.
True. Bud, who is in your top 4, and how confident are you in them at this point?
I think the top 3 really in any order is pretty clear. I don't know really who you want to put because Oregon's lost to Arizona now looks a lot better. Alabama did outplay Auburn pretty well and somehow still gave up 630 yards, which is a lot of yards.
Yep.
Florida State, in its ever expanding effort to just troll America, became the first team to turn the ball over 4 times this year against the Power 5 opponent and win. Apparently they were 0-20 before that, so just breaking all kinds of streaks except that winning streak. And then with TCU, I do agree because I think they have 2 or 3 categories. They lost by a field goal on the road at Baylor, which is hey, what do we give people in Vegas for field goal or for home field adjustments? 3 or 4 points. So yeah, about even there. Baylor I think is hurt by not playing anybody in the non-conference at all. TCU is helped a little bit by Minnesota actually having a very nice season by their standards, and then the loss that they have. What's a more respectable loss? 3 points on the road against Baylor, which is obviously a really good team, or losing at 5-loss West Virginia. I think that's probably the difference maker. So TCU would be my number 4 at this point.
And it should be pointed out that Ohio State themselves scheduled Cincinnati, Virginia Tech, and Navy, 3 real-ass teams, if we are going to nitpick and look at complete schedules and not just conference schedules and best wins and best losses. We are now 1 week away, I guess even less than a week, about 6 days away from the actual announcement of these 4 teams. Bud, where do you see the biggest room for chaos, upset, change in this top 3, 4, 5, 6, 7?
Well, I think it's clearly got to be Florida State this weekend, most likely, with them only being favored by 4 points over Georgia Tech. The Tech team, it just looks like they keep getting better. They ended up outplaying Georgia pretty well in that game, if not for the 99-yard fumble return, which was miraculously not stopped by forward progress. If they go down, and let's say Ohio State goes down because Cardale Jones isn't ready to win in the Big Ten championship game, who ends up going here? I mean, are you going to have 2 Big 12 teams in this thing? I think that's very possible. Also, if Missouri was able to pull up an upset over Alabama, that would be pretty chaotic because then you're going to have a lot of these folks stuffing for a 2-loss SEC team.
Yeah, all of a sudden Missouri's everybody's favorite team in the SEC.
Yeah. So there's a lot of potential chaos scenarios, and I think that really speaks to some of these championship games this weekend. The spreads aren't that huge, and I don't think any of these teams are great teams. I think we have a lot of very good teams this year, but a lot of parity, a lot of close clustering in that top 10, top 15 range this year, and so a lot of stuff could continue to happen.
Jason, to you, what is the most realistic of switches, potential changes in that top that perhaps we were not expecting?
I mean, just to go along with what Bud's saying, that the ACC title game is a really tough matchup for Florida State. I mean, we talk about a team with defensive line and linebacker injuries going against a very physical, hard-to-prepare-for offense on a 1-week notice. That's a hard time, even if you have 5-star athletes. If players are hurt, then they'll be joined by players who get hurt during that game. That's what happens when you play that offense. To me, Arizona is a good team. It's a good challenge for Oregon. I just cannot picture Oregon losing to the same team 3 times in a row with a healthy-ish offensive line. That could happen, but that would be amazing. And it's kind of hard to ever picture Bama losing. Just we've been conditioned that way. But if FSU gets past Georgia Tech by any number of points, that's pretty impressive just based on where the 2 teams are right now.
True, and we didn't touch on it too thoroughly other than we expect Bama to win, but we have somebody who covers Missouri on this panel. Bill, how do you handicap Missouri's chances? It's quite difficult to really feel good about, as good as Bama is, blowing out a team that plays defense as well as Missouri has, and as well as Missouri has shown themselves to an ability to run the ball, as Missouri has. Is there a feeling among Missouri fans, is there a feeling, as you look at this, that this team can hang with Bama, this team can play Bama like some of the teams that have given Alabama trouble, like Tennessee and Arkansas? What is the general thought?
Well, I mean, I think this front seven that Missouri has is just nasty. They're really destructive. Disruptive, I should say. Destructive too, I guess.
Sure.
But this is just a really good defense, and I think at this point Missouri fans have faith that if you can beat this defense, power to you, because really nobody else has. Georgia really didn't even beat it up too much. They averaged like 4 yards per play. Missouri couldn't keep its offense on the field without turning the ball over, and eventually the points kind of piled up there. So I think it's easy enough to create a script. Here's how Missouri wins the game. They control the line of scrimmage on defense.
Right.
They force a lot of punts. Matty Mock's, if he passes, hit the ground and don't land in the other team's arms. He's throwing less and less of them. I think he's getting a little more mature, a little more confident, especially now that his receivers are healthy. But he's still going to make a couple mistakes, and if he doesn't pay for those, then Missouri certainly can hang around. It is hard to. I mean, I can't remember the last time I picked against Alabama, and I'm probably not going to here, but it's not hard to see how Missouri stays in it.
All right, and to follow up on that, which of the three teams, Bill, that we are positive are in the top three at this very moment can lose and stay in?
I don't think any of them can at this point.
Really? Why is that?
Well, I mean, I'm all for saying the SEC is the best conference. It clearly is, especially just because of the West. Mm-hmm. But if you've got, but this isn't like a Champions League situation where you have allotments. And so if you're looking at all these, if the other one-loss teams and Florida State all win, I don't see Alabama only falling 3 spots. Now, I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe Baylor, Baylor probably, maybe they stay ahead of Baylor, but if Ohio State looks really good against Wisconsin and TCU drubs Iowa State like we think, I think they both go ahead of Alabama. So, Florida State, if they're third now, they're not going to only fall 1 spot for losing. So at this point, I would say that none of them make it if they lose on Saturday.
Jason, do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think somebody could hang on by their fingernails?
I think, any of those top 3 teams sticking around, you're going to need chaos for them to actually lose a game and stay in the top 4.
Right.
Significant chaos. And if there's that much, Arizona and Georgia Tech are probably going to rank in the top 10. If there's enough chaos to knock FSU or Oregon out of the top 3, then you could probably just sub those teams in for the team that, if Arizona beats Oregon and a whole bunch of crazy stuff goes on, just put in Arizona. That's the easy thing to do. They're the conference champion. But if Missouri, they probably are not going to rank in the top 10, probably more in the top 15, maybe 13 or 14 or so.
Right.
So I think if Bama loses the SEC title game, I don't see Missouri taking that spot. So
no SEC team in.
Well, that could be a situation where if Bama loses and there's other chaos, Bama could stick around.
Right.
That would require the committee to go away from the conference champions heavy preference. I think you'd need at least one Big 12 team to lose, which would be Baylor, because we love you, Ohio State, but we can't really count on you for chaos this year, it doesn't seem. So I would say with a heavy dose of chaos, but otherwise, no. Lose and you're out this week. As long as you don't take the whole thing down with you.
Bud, do you agree? Do you disagree? How do you handicap the teams? Are there situations where a team in the top 3 could lose on a fluky situation and acquit themselves well and stay high in the minds of voters?
This is one of the situations where Bankoff needs to pony up some money for one of those interactive slider boards where we're like, okay, if this happens, and then we move it all around and we do all this kind of little dance, song and dance there. It's a hard question to answer in an audio format. If nobody else loses and only one of the current top 3 teams loses, then no. If we get a lot of chaos like Jason and Bill discussed, then I think it's possible.
Okay, fair enough, and let's go from there into this. Bud, as it stands now, who is the best 1-loss team or 2-loss team, in the country?
Best 2-loss team. I would have to say, I would have probably said Georgia, but now they have 2 losses.
3 losses, yeah.
Or, excuse me, now they have 3 losses. Georgia Tech's pretty good. Now, granted, they did beat a Clemson team that I think with Deshaun Watson is better than almost all the 2-loss teams, to be honest, even though they have 3 losses. So with that defense when he's in there. In fact, I looked up the quarterback rating there with the 3-loss. Deshaun Watson, 188 quarterback rating. His replacement, 111. So basically, if he's not in there, Clemson's offense is totally crap. Probably Georgia Tech, though. They did beat Clemson. They did beat Georgia on the road. Wisconsin, I think, is another very good 2-loss team. Michigan State, I still think is a really solid team. They took care of business this weekend. They're 10-2, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think probably those three.
All right, Jason, the best two-loss team in the country at the moment.
I'm going to stick with Mississippi State. I mean, I think them losing to Ole Miss, that doesn't really change anything for me. I'm still very impressed with Ole Miss on the season. Sure, they got blown out by Arkansas. That's their weird game of the year that I'll just pretend didn't happen.
Right.
I think their 2 losses should be to top 15 teams. If you look at it a different way, who had the best wins, maybe you go Arizona. But for me, I think it's probably one of those two at this point.
Bill, who's the best 1 or 2-loss team in the country?
Well, I was going to say Ole Miss until I realized they have 3.
Yeah.
So I guess not. Arizona probably has one of the best resumes for sure. But if you had a big two-loss team tournament, I would probably end up picking Mississippi State.
Fair enough. And who is the worst FBS undefeated team in the country, Bill?
You're going to really ask me that question? They already hate me anyway.
He said FBS, so you can't say Harvard.
Yeah.
I know.
That was tricky of Dan.
Yep. That's me. When you look at we're looking at tiers, obviously, when we talk about these top 10, 12 teams. Who is and this was a question that I'm pulling from our comments, and unfortunately I don't have the ability to credit that person because I am lazy, but this is not my question, but who is the worst best team and who is the best worst team in the I don't know if it's the conversation, if it's the top 25, college football. How do you look at this, Bill?
The worst best team.
Worst good team, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, everybody kind of knows what I think of FSU at this point, and it's kind of a funny situation because if FSU gets healthy over the bowl break, then they might not be the worst really good team anymore, and obviously that's been a big part of their issue in the front seven especially. So if they heal up, all they got to do is survive, and if they heal up, they might play their best ball come January. But
right.
To date, they've clearly, to me, of the top 3 especially, they've been the least reliable until the fourth quarter when they become the most reliable by far. It's hard for me to give another answer besides that. Best bad team or best team? I don't, however we want to say that.
Let's say Ole Miss outside of the top 15. Let's say Ole Miss. Okay.
Yeah, they're 13th now,
they're
so
13th,
don't count. But they've been really, really good. They fell into a funk there against Arkansas, but they've been overall they've still been a really, really good team this year.
A team, Jason, that I don't think everybody's completely sold on is perhaps playing on the level of some of the other teams in the playoff conversation is Ohio State because of their defense, because of their loss. They've certainly gotten much better over the course of the season, but now they will be without J.T. Barrett, their Heisman contending quarterback. To what degree, if at all, do you think they should be punished for simply suffering an injury, something that happens to everybody?
Yeah, that's sort of the big question with the committee right now. They said before the season that they would factor injuries in some nebulous way.
Right.
And they say that they are looking for the best teams, not the most deserving teams, and you can certainly make the case that Ohio State is one of the most deserving teams with or without injuries. I don't know if you can make the case, just based on the fact that we have not seen much from Cardell Jones, that Ohio State is one of the best teams. So if that is what they're looking for, they very well could, snub Ohio State just because a player got hurt, which to me would be playing God, would be presumptuous, would be complete bullshit in every way to avoid rewarding a team just based on something happening to it and not based on what that group of players and coaches accomplished through the season. To me, you evaluate a team based on what it did, not on what it might do. And if the whole thing is about putting together teams that are going to play 3 really great games, regardless of the whole season that came before it, then scrap it. Let's go back to the BCS and award the 2 teams that had the best seasons and let them play for the title. Otherwise, this is just a Vince McMahon, let's throw together teams that are going to have really good games. Let's have, SMU in there, because that would be fun to watch, right? Let's watch Bama play SMU. That'd be hilarious. Why not? To me, if Ohio State is one of the 4 best teams with J.T. Barrett, then they're one of the 4 teams that should go to the playoff without J.T. Barrett. And, the whole idea it makes me so angry I want to throw things. Just the idea of not including a team because a player got hurt. That is asinine.
Is there a certain level when you watch this weekend's game against Wisconsin that Cardale Jones could play at? Is there a final score that would satisfy you, even though you do feel like Ohio State, if they're deserving with him, they're deserving without him because it's an entire season? Is there something that will sort of reinforce that idea? Is there a score? Is there a score differential that's like, yes, they've continued this level of play?
Yeah, I mean, Wisconsin's a really good team, so if they beat them by, even if it's just 5 points, that's probably about what they would have done with JT Barrett. So I think that would show the committee that they've, continued the same level of success. So it's sort of a situation where there's not really, if they win by 1 point, that's still a good win. That's still a win away from home against the top 15 team for a conference championship. So that should still weigh heavily in Ohio State's favor. TCU might just straight up take the bid without any sort of injury adjustment. Baylor might as well. But if it comes down to JT Barrett not being there, being the thing that decides the 4th seed in the playoff, that's ridiculous. And we need to change the whole system immediately. So for me, if Ohio State wins, they should be compared just as fairly as the other 2 or 3 teams in the running for that spot, no matter what the score is.
But do you agree? Do you disagree? Is Ohio State, without JT Barrett, good enough, talented enough to hang with these teams if they have a quarterback deficiency or just an experience deficiency at quarterback? Do you have the same general philosophy?
I think it largely depends on, are we trying to pick the 4 best teams or the 4 most deserving teams? Because Ohio State, if they beat Wisconsin, would certainly be one of the most deserving teams, perhaps even one of the most 4 deserving teams. If you're picking the 4 best teams, I think you have to realize, if they lost Braxton Miller and now they lost JT Barrett as well, they may not be. But you remember, they're underdogs this weekend. So there's already been sort of a Vegas line adjustment. If they pull the upset, which I guess we can now call it one, Wisconsin, I think you have to look at that very favorably and say, hey, they've done a nice job with this kid. It's Ohio State. They're going to run the hell out of their quarterback anyway. He's a big, bruising guy. I mean, that's kind of what they do. I don't know how much you can knock them for that. And on the other hand, this is sort of the situation that the committee was contemplating, right? When they said we are going to take injuries into account. It's a late season injury at the most important position on the field of quarterback. And luckily for the committee, they are going to get to see him play in one game. I think the nightmare scenario is you have a conference championship winner who then loses their superstar quarterback in the 4th quarter of that conference title game, and you don't get to see the backup really at all. So luckily for the committee, they are going to get to see one game with him against a good opponent.
Sean McGuire led Florida State, one of the 4 best teams in the country.
I mean, Jimbo made the case today that the committee already got to see FSU beat one of the best defenses in the country with Sean McGuire. And we've already seen Florida State can win a game when they don't have Sean McGuire and they have Jameis Winston turn the ball over 4 times.
True.
But no, I don't think Sean McGuire led Florida State as one of the best. No, definitely not. I don't think Florida State is one of the 4 best if Winston's going to play poorly.
Fair enough. I will ask the same question for Bill and the team he covers. But instead of quarterback, is Marcus Golden injured for Missouri? As we've actually seen this season, Missouri played worse without him.
He missed the Indiana game, and Kevin Wilson, who's a very smart guy, said, we have a spot to run right over there, and just pitched the ball to Coleman right to where Golden was going to be the entire second half. And Missouri kind of slowed it down, but they couldn't stop him in the end, and that's how they lost that game. Well, that and the offensive line playing the worst game I've ever seen in my life. But that's with Golden, he makes one more play, and Missouri is 11-1 right now. So, that's a good example of an injury having an effect. It is going to be funny, by the way, if one of the top 3 teams loses, and Baylor beats Kansas State like 66-3, and Ohio State beats Wisconsin like 17-16, while Cordale Jones throws 4 interceptions, and they only win because Joel Stave threw 5. That's going to be a very interesting scenario, Baylor versus Ohio State, where Cordale Jones almost lost them the game. Does Baylor jump them at that point? I think that would be that would make Jason very angry in the end, the verdict that they came up with.
Well, I think as long as they don't say anything about, because this quarterback's hurt, that's why we're doing this.
We know that Jeff Long will talk.
Jeff, just don't talk, and everything will be fine. Just say we think Baylor's the better team, and then go off air, and everything's fine. If Baylor beats Kansas State by 63 points, that's great. That can stand on its own as a piece of evidence.
Yep.
You don't need to defend that with, hey, this other guy got hurt, so the 12 games that came before it are deleted from the memory banks. Just Don't even mention it, and everything will be fine.
I'm going to ask about Oregon because I haven't yet. I feel pretty good about Oregon. They have the best quarterback on terms of the level he's playing at right now of anybody in the country. Bill, if Oregon is going to have a breakthrough season this year, we've seen them reach the national championship. We've seen them play well against just about everybody beyond the creme de la creme of teams that play in the South, LSU, Auburn. Who would be a more favorable matchup for them to play in the national championship? Florida State or Alabama?
Alabama shuts down the run.
True.
As currently constituted, again, a healthier FSU maybe is a little bit different, but Alabama would make Mariota beat them with his arm, and maybe he could. But against Florida State, the job would be a little bit easier because they would be able to run the ball more effectively, and he'd be, in fewer passing downs, things like that. So simply because Alabama's defense is better, I think they would rather play FSU in that situation. Although, I mean, their defense also isn't that great, and so Winston would be prime for another comeback late. But no, I think FSU's a better matchup for them.
Bud, do you agree? Do you disagree?
No, I totally agree. I also was discussing this on Twitter today. I think if you're Florida State, you'd rather go out to Pasadena and play Oregon with close to a month to prepare than you would play Nick Saban's team with them having a month to prepare, as opposed to the flip side in which you would have to, in order to win another national title, beat Bama coming off a month rest and then play Oregon with only a week to get ready. I think you'd rather have the extra prep time to play Oregon because you can better simulate their tempo and have that more ingrained in you over a longer period of time.
Jason, is the height of the play of Marcus Mariota enough to make you believe that this could be the year that Oregon puts it all together in January?
Yeah, I think so. It's hard to argue he's not the best player in the country, even with Amari Cooper, Melvin Gordon, Scooby Wright, the totally overlooked Arizona linebacker with about a million stats in each category. You have the best player in the country and you have an otherwise pretty good team with tons of speed, sure, you can win the national title. It's sort of hard to actually picture it just because Alabama's in the running, Florida State's in the running. Your mind says, sure, one of those teams will win, and that'll be that, and everybody will be mad all offseason. But, yeah, it's just looking at it without remembering the last several years and the 90s and all that, yeah, Oregon can do it. I mean, all you need is beat his two teams.
True.
And, their injury situation throughout the season has looked really, really perilous. But after once the offensive line got healthy, everything else didn't really seem to matter all that much.
This is true. Final question, Bill, and this is the most personal question I could ask as it relates to college football.
Okay.
Which player who will definitely not be involved in the playoff do you wish would be on the playoff stage just so we could see him play at a very high level with that kind of bright light?
Scooby Wright's a really good one. Marcus Golden has been amazing these last 3 weeks. That would be he has kind of blown me away. He's blown Garrett Pinkle away after the game on Friday. They asked him, about Golden recovering the fumble again, and he just kind of chuckled and shook his head. He's like, I love this team. I love this, and he was kind of speechless a little bit. So the level he's playing at right now, I'll give a shout out to the Missouri guy here. He's been just amazing since he got all the way healthy.
Jason, who do you wish could see the field against Alabama, Oregon, Florida State, any of these teams? Could be a player for Duke, could be a player for Harvard, whoever.
Let's see, Harvard. That's wow. I can't decide, Dan. There's so many names.
So many
in my head right now. We've already seen this one actually. Gerard Holloman, the Louisville safety, who I think has tied the FBS record for interception this season. We saw what he did to Jameis, and Jameis did not have a great time against him. So let's put him up against Blake Sims, who just threw 3 picks to an Auburn secondary that does not have a safety of that caliber. Let's see what happens there.
Bud, which player do you wish we could see on a stage like this year?
I kind of want to see Devontae Parker because I thought he was maybe the best player I saw in the ACC this year, but we only got to see him play, 4 or 5 games at the little receiver because he was injured for most of the year and came back. And I just want to see more games about Devontae Parker because I really enjoy watching him, preferably not when he's playing Florida State, but he's just really, really good. So Louisville's not going to make it in, but nice comeback year for him in the second half.
I'm going to give you a name just because I'm a West Coast person. You know this name is serious to me because he plays for Washington. Not Kakaha, as good as he is. Shaq Thompson.
Yeah.
Shaq might be the best college football athlete we have at the moment to be able to play outside linebacker and running back in what looked to be an even better way than what we saw from Miles Jack last season, who did the same thing. I think Shaq Thompson doing 3 to 4 incredible things in incredible ways would be pretty outstanding.
Plus, Shaq Thompson doing that in an offense that just a Chris Peterson offense. To me, if you're going to do something in it, I lend more credence to that than doing that in whatever offense UCLA happens to be running at the time. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just feel like if you're doing that at Washington, there's a reason for it. It's planned.
Right.
It made sense to someone. To UCLA, it's just, hey, that guy's big. Let's put face paint on him and give him the ball.
This is true, and you're not going to believe which Pacific Northwest University Shaq Thompson almost went to. You won't believe it. In any case, gentlemen, any parting shots? Anything you're specifically looking forward to this weekend that we have not touched on? We'll start with you, Bud.
I really want to see how Georgia Tech plays without their best receiver, who I now don't know what his name was, but he has 40%.
Smelter?
Yes, Smelter. Really nice player for them this year. Georgia Tech can actually throw the ball this year, which is a little bit different for people that just look at the record but haven't actually watched them. They gave a lot of teams trouble because they actually can complete some passes, and not just like the fake the option, chuck the ball downfield, one-on-one matchup type stuff, but they can throw a little bit underneath and somewhat in rhythm. So being able to watch him this weekend, but he's out. So I do want to see how they're able to throw without him and how that changes how Florida State plays. Because Florida State, a lot of little cool, interesting matchups this weekend with defensive coordinator Charles Kelly, who used to be Georgia Tech's interim defensive coordinator, and then they also played the Citadel, which runs the Georgia Tech offense earlier this year. In anticipation,
it all runs through the Citadel.
In anticipation of a game that was supposed to be played this year, but because of the ACC's expansion to 14, was not, and yet Florida State still ended up playing Georgia Tech anyway. So Illuminati, 28-0.
Jason, what is the specific thing that you are most excited to see this weekend?
First, I apologize for these barking dogs. No, I don't. Nothing to deal with them. They're beautiful, beautiful animals. I'll go with the SEC title game. I mean, Bama versus Mizzou's defense. Missouri is basically an SEC West team. They have an incredible defensive line, and they don't really care about offense. And I can't get enough of those games, so let's have one more.
Fair enough. Bill, to you, what is that one thing?
I would point. I mean, all the great games are going to be great. I would point out that, as I mentioned in the numerical today, the Conference USA title game pits teams that scored 66 and 76 last week, and one of them allowed 67. So that's going to be awesome. That should be a really fun way to start off that Saturday of action. And then the other thing I'm going to mention is the Southern Band is so much better in person than I even thought. I got to see them Friday and Saturday. All the love in the world to everything associated with the Bayou Classic.
Nice. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time, and we will touch base next week after all of this is sorted out by people slightly less intelligent than the selection committee. How about that?